consciousness is all there is, but it's also the body. And I have throughout my life realized three great things about consciousness while experiencing it. The very nature of the mystical experience. It has happened 3 times in my life. 2 of them, no, perhaps I should just say the first one was oneness with the universe. Or perhaps I should call it bathing in the nature of the universe, the universal mind. The second was when I was grown up, and that was oneness with nature, resonating the divine nature of nature and experiencing me, myself, this body, every body as the same expression of consciousness. And the third thing was meeting the oneness inside myself, as if personality, identification with anything that is built into our thinking system, it just vanished. And I was just one with myself. These 3 experiences, I just feel this urge for talking about it over and over again, because for me they are key factors of life. Not only for me, I was just happy enough to be miserable enough to have to experience it. It is like every time my life was so miserable that I couldn't bear it, heaven's gates opened up. And I just think that now is a good time to talk about how hope and health is built into the system of mankind, the system of nature, the system of consciousness, the system of the big mind, universal mind. So if you like, then lean back and have a cup of coffee or a biscuit or whatever. I don't care how you listen to this, or if you just skip ahead, that's fine. But perhaps some of you need to hear just a little bit of this once in a while. Hope and health are built into this system that we are and that we are living in. When I was a child, I had this great existential crisis about life and death because some woman that I knew who was a mother, she died. And she was a mother for a child my age, and I was about, 9 or 10 years old, I don't remember exactly. And I was just living this life with a deep thinking system. I was philosophical already then. And I couldn't get it. Why should she die? There was no meaning. It was just illness, cancer, that made her die. But it wasn't so much a why. It was much more, how can that happen? How on earth can dying be part of life? What was the whole purpose of living if one should only die? And what was the purpose of being a mother? Having a child? To then just die? And it just hit a nerve in me so deeply that I, as a child, of course, a female child wanting someday to be a mother myself, but I just couldn't wrap myself around it, how death is possible. when we are living, when we are alive as we are, what's the point if we are only to die anyway? And I was so frustrated in this existential crisis that I was out for a walk, and I remember just kind of giving up. I did not want to live myself if the end result just was to die. And even perhaps I too should die at a young age. Or perhaps my own mother or father should die at a young age. And I didn't want to live that because that was horrible. It was horrible to think of death arriving. So I was ready to die myself because nothing made sense. And then heaven gave me this present of taking me for a visit. I remember the feeling, the sensation of just being pulled out of my own body. So my body, my physical body kept on walking. But my energetic body left the physical body. It was kind of drawn out of it, and it felt like a magnetic pull. And I was pulled upwards. At least that was the sensation of the feeling of being pulled upwards. And I remember kind of magnetically being put, my consciousness, my energetic body being put at a certain spot in the universe. And it really felt like I was in the universe. It felt really, really, truly as if I was in the universe. Being placed there, having a place of my own, like being a star. And I remember having a third eye contact with some of the other stars. They were far, far away. If I had to measure the length at which they were away, it was light years. Oh, I don't know if it would be light years, but it would be very, very far away. But I would have this contact with the other stars, some of them, and really feeling very close to me, as if they greeted me home. Hi, there you are. Here we are. Now we see each other again. And it was amazing. I can cry every time I think of it, because I sense the sensation is still here in my body, in my mind, in my consciousness. And as I hang there, but stable, I was stable hanging in the universe because I had my spot there, magnetically pulled, magnetically drawn to that point or spot in the universe. I felt the sensation of the surroundings, the environment, and it was so spacious. It was really like being in the beautiful starry night, you know, the dark night where the stars can be seen, but yet again the darkness was so light. It was so permeable, is it called that? Where I could see anything through the darkness. The darkness wasn't cold, it wasn't black, it was very visible. And that sensation of the spaciousness and the deep feeling, the deep sensation that everything was in place, and that everything was also in this kind of dynamic movement, but in stillness. There was a stillness there that had information pumped into it. It was like information in every single little spot. Yet it wasn't with words. It was not anything that I can put words to, but it was clearly information. As if it was one great relational field, not only with this consciousness that was placed there amongst other stars, that was consciousness placed there, it was also in between all of it, as if the air was just filled with information. And it was so soothing. And everything was in place. Everything was fine. And I immediately realized that there is no thing as such of life and death. Life and death is not a reality at that consciousness level. But I was there, and I was aware that I was there. My body wasn't, but my consciousness was, and I was part of it all. And it was beautiful. There was nothing. Really, there was nothing. Yet there was everything. And yet again, I can cry thinking about it, because it's crazy that that exists. That spaciousness that is filled with all there is. It's like this suspension of everything. And throughout my whole system, that existential crisis just vanished. There was no crisis anymore, because the question, why on earth are we alive if only to die, it has just dissolved. There was no question left, because life and death didn't exist. It doesn't exist at that level of consciousness. And I was aware of it. So that is a truth that can be taken with me, even though I do not know now what my consciousness is, because my consciousness is also that consciousness. But I was only a child, and I had a lot of life to live still. Anyways, up there, when I realized that that existential crisis had vanished, and I just felt peace. A peace that cannot be described. Then I realized, or just out of nowhere, suddenly there was this greater consciousness looking like a whale, and yet so light that it was not a whale, but there's something whaley about it, something like a whale, and yet it was just a consciousness bubble. It was very high functional, greater than me, and it met me very close. It was like we were just a couple of inches apart, and it looked at me with its inner eye to my inner eye, and it saw me deeply. And the only thing it did was to confirm, and it imprinted in me a confirmation. It is true. Take it with you. And it was so happy. It was not at all serious. It was so light, and yet so filled with not only serenity, but also a depth of consciousness that it is not at all surreal. It was very real, but while speaking about it in this physical world, it seems surreal. But but it is perhaps one of the most real thing I have ever experienced in this lifetime. At that point, when that confirmation was made, I was put down back into my body, and it felt like just a backwards process where the magnetism let go from up there and sank into this as if it was another magnetic pull from the body. And I kind of woke up into the physical body of a child that was just walking, and I of course remembered who I was and where I was and the circumstances of my childish life. And I was happy and I was sad, and it was like the frustration and the salvation started at the same time. Because how on earth can one go around saying everything is wonderful, everything is peaceful, everything is beautiful, and there's nothing to do, and it's okay? Death and life, it doesn't exist. That was not possible. I had to live under the circumstances of physical life, time and space, other people's opinions, and I had to fit in because I was a child, and of course I had to follow the system, and I did. And it was like two roads inside of me, one who fit in and one who definitely didn't. So that was the first conscious encounter of consciousness greater than me. And yet again, still having this beginning understanding that it is also me. And looking around at people and knowing they must be the same. Perhaps they are the stars that I greeted up there. Perhaps everybody is having their own spot in the universe and having a great deal of love and respect for walking around down here on earth not knowing anything. And yet again, of course, also knowing that many people know many things about consciousness. And I found out when I grow older to find books, to talk with people, to find somebody who knew more than me, or at least had words to express what it was that I knew, because I knew something very definitely, but I hadn't got the words to describe it. So it was like I had to find a landscape of all these things. But it wasn't easy because, well, I am from Denmark. We do not have a very open, at least we did not back then. I was born in the 70s. I couldn't find communities where I deeply could integrate. So it was a surface level of life, but it was okay. Even though the frustration grew harder. It was so frustrating to walk around, and perhaps many of you know exactly what I'm talking about, having the sensation of heaven. How to get it here? How do we do that? How can we have heaven on earth? How can that consciousness be here? In the body, in the flesh, because this is where we experience, for now at least. Well, we experience also all over, but we do have a system we can call a body and a mind. So even though I found answers through different systems, and I grew up deciding to be a therapist, music therapist, because I wanted to use the music. In the music I used since I was a child, I could express myself and I could feel and sense myself, and it put me in direct contact with something greater that was kind of having that consciousness with me. So I decided that the way to help could be to be music therapist and guide people to find this consciousness inside themselves. But it was too complicated. It was too academic for me. It was too difficult and hard to get. It was like it just brought me out of the serenity. And I got frustrated because I thought that I had to do what I was taught. But I couldn't grasp it. It was not my real identity. It was like learning a new language when I had a language of my own, but it was just without words. But I had to learn the words. It just didn't fit. It was not the right language for me. And I couldn't figure out how to find my language. I didn't know that my language, most of all, was without words. So I got more and more frustrated. And even though I chose the right things to be living in this world of form where I had to fit in, I chose the right choices. Education and work, and a lover to call of mine. We had babies and a house. And everything was so safe, so secure. But I wasn't safe and secure because I was lost. I couldn't feel what I had experienced as a child. Until the day where I broke down and had to lay myself down, and the doctors called it a depression. And I knew I had an existential crisis, just like I did when I was a child. This time it wasn't a question of life and death. That was okay with me. I could live or I could die. That didn't matter. But the question of why am I here when I cannot get heaven on earth? What am I not getting? How is it that I cannot find the ease and the deep consciousness and peace? Where is it? I know it's here somewhere, but where? And a year went by, and I tried everything, and I surrendered, and I went deeply into spiritual practices. And I felt kind of relieved when terms just like Christ consciousness and being crucified and, well, all these esoteric terms came to me, but it wasn't enough. I had to have the direct experience. It couldn't just be thought of. I had to live it, but I didn't know how. And yet again, I was living it because I felt like Christ consciousness trying to get its way through to me. And I felt I was crucified into earth. It was like heaven just stabbed me and trapped me in my body like a crucifixion. I couldn't get out of it. I had to just hang there for a year. And when that year had passed, and I had hung there on the crucifix for a year, and I had cried my heart out over and over again, and yet again, there was only one thing, and that was depression. I didn't have medication because it didn't speak to me. But then one day after a year, I went down to the nature. There was a spot where I lived at that time with nature all around, so beautiful, a forest, where there was down in the bottom of the hill, a train passing by a couple of times an hour. And I was sitting there, tired into my bones. Couldn't do it anymore, couldn't be human anymore, couldn't figure it out. I just wanted to go home, and I knew that home, it must be there. I have never been thinking about taking my own life, but at that single point in my history, I knew that if I just walked down and placed myself before the train, I would in a split second be free and come home and just not get the heaven on earth, but I would go to heaven. And it was such a relief. Just to have that insight that was what was calling me, being free. And that insight of freedom did it for me. So many things happened at once, and I loved every single thing of it. First thing was that it felt like my inside was so deeply okay with me. So my energetic body once more left my physical body. This time it felt like it was ready to leave by going down to the train, before the train. But at the same time as that feeling of being free of my physical body, being ready to die, that loosened something in my physical body, and it felt like I have inner vision, I have clear sight, I'm clairvoyant. And for my inner sight, I saw that I had a backpack on my shoulders that I didn't knew I had. But at that same split second that my body released my energetic body, that backpack was taken off my shoulders. It felt like there were angelic beings or consciousness that helped me, that did it for me. Took it down and sat it beside me. And I could see with my inner eye. And I could feel and sense in my body that backpack was filled with stones, great big rocks and blocks of stones, and little small ones, and everything just packed into that backpack that I have been walking around with. But now it was released from my body, and it was just sat there beside me. And I felt free, and I felt that my energetic body came back into my physical body, and that I was whole, and that I just knew there was no reason to go down and put myself in front of the train. There was no reason to die, because now I felt in my physical body the freedom that I was looking for, the consciousness, so grand, it could just come through me. Even though I had a physical body, I didn't have to go up there. I didn't have to go home into the great big universal consciousness. I had it here now. It was amazing. And I remember having that very clear thought that said, now success, that's something totally different than it has never been before. Because that backpack with stones, that was all that I had tried to do to get success in my life. All these choices that we made or we make to have success, to be okay as human, to fit in and to survive and to succeed. But that had nothing to do with the essence of life, the consciousness, the greatness of information, of peace, of knowing without knowing anything. And then I looked up and I saw nature around me. I was in a forest. And I remember clearly this mystical experience of looking at a bird and feeling really essentially into the frequency of my body and that bird. We are the same. I looked at the sky and the clouds and had the same experience of just vibrating into the essence of that creation. And really deeply and very silently realizing, wow, we are made of the same consciousness. We are essentially the same. And I felt like I had no weight to me. All the weight of me was down here beside me. My consciousness was there. My body, of course, was there, but it was integrated, so beautifully integrated, because I was free of all that thought, all that thinking system. It was gone. And I remember looking at a tree and a piece of grass. And even though the tree was so grand and the piece of grass was so little, it too was made of the same consciousness, made of the same material, made of the same frequency as me. And I felt totally free and present. Very, very present. The next thing that happened was that I looked up. I had just been looking at the nature. And I looked up and I felt like I was this newborn baby. So new that nothing had an imprint on me. And it felt like being a little chicken just coming out of the eggshell. So I felt I was sitting in an eggshell and the shell had just broken down and just was laying around me. So I felt so new. No imprints, no feathers on my chicken body. Just totally new, fresh. And also vulnerable, because I had nothing to stand against anything with. I also could call it, I felt like the backpack with stones was like something that I had used to hold myself up with. And it had broken down. There was nothing to hold myself up with anymore. But I was just there, free. And then nature, my inner vision showed me a great wave, like by the ocean, a wave of water, but here it was a wave of air, but a wave of powerful air, life force. And it rose out in the horizon, it rose and it came to me, and it slowly came to me, and I could feel the only clear thought was, well, I did not die in front of the train, but perhaps I will die now, because I have nothing to stand against this wave of life force coming to me. It really felt like I was just a vulnerable little newborn baby with nothing to stand against life force. And it came to me. It was green. I was in the forest, perhaps that's why. But it was a green, gigantic wave. And when it hit me, I thought, just if it was a wave of water, I thought I would be thrown away. But I found out that it very calmly just moved through me, and I could sit without having anything to do with it. I shouldn't push it away. I shouldn't fight against it. I shouldn't try to hold myself up. I could just sit there and it would just penetrate me, go right through me. And I realized that all these building blocks that was removed from me and all that stuff that I had tried to keep myself strong with on the outside, it was like it was put inside of me. And I felt that I had now, with that life force going through me, I felt that I was not newborn at the same kind of way, because it was like all the others, it was like the force had I don't know the right word. It had collected me, connected me, put into me my own inner midline. So I did not need anything outside of me. I now had it inside of me. A midline inside of me. And all was able to be penetrated by life force. It would just be a great experience of having life force going through me, and yet again also have this midline being able to navigate around in the world. And I remember at that point when I realized that I was not this fragile newborn baby or chicken just coming out of the egg. I was now quite mature. I was fresh and I was new, but I was force. I had a force through me, and I was very mature energetically. And I just spontaneously rose up, and I had this urge to dance and laugh, and it felt like everything was new. So when I looked around, everything was new in my eyes, even though everything was the same. And I just realized I have no depression anymore. I am not depressed. I was 2 minutes ago, but now I am not depressed. I laugh, I love, I love life. I know I am life. I have life going through me. I am pure consciousness. I am nothing of all these things that I thought I was. All this identity, it's nothing to do with the essence of me. I am just pure sky. And I felt pure sky. I felt nothing could stick to me. So I went home and I was happy. And a month later, I had to reorient myself into physical life. I didn't have a job at that time because I had been sick for a year with depression. So I had time to reorient. And very soon I found my wonderful education of being a biodynamic craniosacral therapist. And that was a savior of mine because it taught me just what I had experienced, that the life force is the one that has health built into it. And we must let it live through us. We must not hold against it. We must not fight against it. We must let ourselves crack open, being kind of vulnerable to it. But we will realize that we are so strong when life force goes through us. That's where the sensitivity turns into a wonderful force that does no harm. And a couple of months later, I started the education to become a biodynamic craniosacral therapist. And at the same time, I got a new job where I should be the music therapist that I was educated to be, with people who had dementia. And that was so wonderful because people with dementia, they had also lost or was in the process of losing their backpack of stones, their little mind, their thinking system. Success was also something different for them. And when I stepped into the room and was just present with consciousness, life force, and this beautiful, beautiful surrendered room of nothingness where everything lies. Just when I was a child and was up in space, the spaciousness where there is so much information without words. That space was wonderful to be in with people who have dementia. So I had 7 years with them, and with my education to become also a biodynamic craniosacral therapist, where we learn to use this life force intentionally. And at the same time, throughout these 7 years, I also met the 3 principles as Sydney Banks has presented them, with his insights telling that we are just. Everything is made out of 3 principles. That is indeed one, but you can call it consciousness, the principle of consciousness, the principle of universal mind, and the principle of thought. And with that, everything is created, and it's pure innocence that we create things that are not healthy for us. But it is not because the system doesn't work. It's just because we do not know how to work in the system. So when we realize that all these thought patterns, all these stones in the backpack that we create for ourselves, when we realize that that is not the essence of nature, that is not the essence of consciousness, that is not the essence of big mind, universal mind, then we can lean back and let it come to us. and let the wisdom of it all make the way for us, with us, not my will, but the greater will of it all. That was such a relief to now have found words to describe what I had known since child, but didn't have the words to describe it. But that we create our reality because we have the principle of thought. To use this universal mind and create whatever we want. But it's not up to us. We can only do it as innocently as we can, whilst we try to figure out how it works. But when we find out that it works the best, when we just follow our inner calling and not what the outer world says is best. We must learn to find our own signals in our own systems to navigate our world. Then we are free. But there are many layers to that, and that is a process. And years went by, and even though I was happy, innocent in every breath I take, I also still created some kind of a backpack, because I am human and I do not know everything at once. I know one step at a time, and so do you. So I created a world where I was happy and I was free, and I felt deeply a great gratitude to have found my peace, to have found my heaven on earth, to be physically embodied and yet having earth being part of universal mind, having universal mind and life force going through me. But one day, perhaps 7 years later, I was laying in bed, having my child lying beside me, falling asleep, and I just laid there, looked out the window. And the thought that came through my mind was not a thought that I made, it was just a thought that came through. And the thought said, how come I'm not really happy when I have everything that I want, and when I now know what I know about life, essence of life, essence of nature, essence of consciousness, at the level that I can know now? I know there are so many levels, and I know many of you have your levels of consciousness that are greater than mine. It is not to say that I know. I do not know. I just know a fractal of what I know, or what is meant to be known. But yet again, I know what I know, and you know what you know, and that's beautiful. But I lay there, and I said to myself, or something said to me, how come I'm not really happy, really free, when I know I can be? Or when I know what I know. So some part of me knew that there was something missing. And then my third mystical experience came. It felt like I just laid there in bed, looking out the window. Very calm, because I had stopped a great deal of worrying in my life. But down my head came a white light. And just like if it was a round white cable going through or a channel, I was opened to being a channel afterwards. Perhaps I should just call it a channel. But opened like a light down through my body. And inside of that channel, I could see so many different lifetimes, as if I saw my own, or perhaps the collective of earlier lifetimes throughout many centuries. So I saw pictures and I felt like my consciousness pinballed between them, up and down and everywhere. And I saw scenarios of very horrible things, but also very loving things. And I was the consciousness of everybody. So that pinball of my consciousness that could see just there, I was the one who got raped. And then in one instant, I was, or perhaps at the same time, I was also the one who raped. And I was the child who watched it. And I was the one who wanted to help. And I was the helpless one who couldn't help. And I was, another scenario, I was a monk who wanted to go to church and to become a monk, to find God, to be set free in God, but who was frustrated because God was missing. And I was also the little lady who just lived by the land and had her little happiness without knowing much, but with having so much peace because she had found God. And I was the woman who lost her child, and I was the one who died, and I was the one who killed, and I was the one who, I was everybody. One at a time, boom, 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 and all of them at the same time. And that scenario just ran through my consciousness and throughout my body. And at the same time, it was like a split second where everything was possible. And it just vanished again. And I just knew that I had PTSD, post-traumatic stress disorder, from earlier lifetimes. And that it was over, that I didn't have them anymore. That was just a spontaneous realization. It's done. I'm free. And I felt like Teflon. I felt like my consciousness was white. There was no grease on it. It was just Teflon. Nothing could hang on to it. And it was beautiful. And it was strange. And yet again, one more time in my life, third time, I just walked around and knew that everything was the same, and yet everything was different. And I felt like the social bonding, it could not be the same, because I had prior made the bond to other people through that channel of mine that had post-traumatic stress disorder. And therefore I just hang on to people based on traumatic responses. But it was gone. I did not have the need or the urge to cling on to anybody. I just had a very distinct need to be myself. So we divorced, my husband and me. Oh, well, we wasn't married, but we were living in a relationship, and we had been living together for 20 years or so. And we just had to split up. And I cried. Well, first I was very, very happy for my freedom of the earlier traumatic experiences. It had nothing to do with anybody in my life. It was all inside of me. I was happy because I felt free inside. And then a month later, I cried. 3 days, I cried. For 3 days, I cried. And I cried my heart out. I was so unhappy, or so filled with sorrow, deep sorrow, but it didn't feel like it was mine. It felt like I grieved the earth. And on the third day, well, on the way I thought perhaps one can die of sorrow, because I felt it went so deep that I thought I would die. And it was not out of drama, because drama had left my life. I feel like the drama triangle had left my life with the experience of finding out that I played all the characters, all the roles. And at that point when that happened, I realized there is no drama triangle. We create it ourselves. We create the drama. That was such a relief. I had no urge to do that anymore. Why create drama? Why create a drama when we can be at peace? That is heaven on earth. But the thing about crying for 3 days, it didn't feel dramatic. It just felt very true that the sorrow was so deep. I didn't know what I cried for. It wasn't the pointing fingers. I didn't cry because I felt I was a victim. Not at all. I was no victim. There was no drama triangle. I was no victim. And I was not the one to win. There was no winner and there was no loser. It was much more of a this and that are true. There was room for everything. I had no judgment in me. So the sorrow came from somewhere else. And suddenly, the third day, I realized I am crying for the illusion of love. I am crying for the earth and humanity's illusion of what love is. And then I stopped crying, because that realization went so deep. The illusion of love. We think we know what love is, but do we? And a great calmness came to me. And that in itself was a great realization about something about love. Romantic love, partnership love, love where kind of trading safety, that is not love. That is a kind of security net that can be very nice to have. Partnership, that is very nice to have. Falling in love with somebody can be very nice to have. But love? Because that consciousness that I had been as a child in contact with, it had set an imprint in me. This is true. That was love. A love that had everything, without words, without promises, without... There was not even hope, because that was not necessary. There was nothing to be frightened of. Everything was there. And at a great equilibrium, is it called that? I cannot say that word, but it was just in total balance, in total, like just smooth, dynamic stillness, living silence, wisdom, consciousness, a life force that could not, there was no doubt. And when I saw nature in that grown-up, mature state of being human, where I just experienced vibrating in my body with nature, that was love too. Such a fulfillment. No detachment, no codependency, no, it was just there. Everything is just there. That is love. There was no separation. It was just there, and I was just part of it. And when I realized that all these things that we people, we human, we make a drama about, that is man-made. We make it ourselves by having all our thoughts and opinions and feelings that we think are so important. It's not important. It's just playing around with it. But it's not life, and it certainly is not love. And I just realized, after these 3 days of crying of the illusion of love, that love has nothing to do with an exchange of anything. Love is not a giving and a taking. Loving is. That's the nature of us. That is our nature. We are loving consciousness in form. We are human beings. We are human consciousness, which is so much more than we think it is. We are also universal consciousness, and all the fuss is man-made. So you can help yourself realize, what is the difference? When is there a fuss in my life? You can be pretty sure it is man-made or woman-made. And then you can also find out by just feeling your way to it. Sensations in your system, in your body, in your consciousness, in your thought system. When am I pure consciousness, which is calm? Not calm because it is forced to be calm, but naturally, inherently still. That is what they meditate for years. But you don't have to meditate for you to find it. I found it in my misery. It can be a breakthrough for everybody. But it can also just be a silent, soft, soothing experience of being okay with everything, where there is no judgment. Whereas this sentence that is this and that are true. Yes, we are alive, and yes, we create drama. But we do not have to. And we can, at any given moment, we realize, wow, I'm making a fuss about something. What is that? We can go out and try to find out and release trauma and blah, blah. But we can also just sit with it for a while without making any stories about it, without making it worse. We can just sit with it and contemplate, letting thoughts go through you without making them heavy. Just know that you are fine, that you are consciousness, that you are nature, that you are with personality, but that is nothing really. That's just a flavor that you have, so you can go around and experience the world, and so that consciousness can experience itself through you. And yes, go around, do what you like. Don't feel judged. But also know that the sweetness of life, I can cry, the sweetness of life, the grace of life, the great wisdom of life. It is not a mystery. It's right here, right now, in you, as well as in me. It's here, and it's now, and it's time. We can talk about these things now, in public. Life is meant to be lived. And life is meant to be experienced in all forms. And sometimes it's tough, and sometimes it's easy, and it's all okay. It really is. It's all okay. This and that are true, and you are allowed to be light and follow your own inner guidance system by listening deeply to the wisdom within you. Because I have realized that what we seek and think is out there, it's not. It really isn't. Well, kind of, but it's not out there that our gratitude of being human is. And I have just such a gratitude to us human that we are here experiencing. And that is here in our experience of being just exactly that. Human consciousness in flesh, spirit in body, formlessness in form. And it's easy, even when it's hard. It's easy to be human when you know that. My life still has obstacles, but I don't see them as that. I see them as loving experiences, so I can feel what it is like being human, being in form, but formlessly. I have absolutely no idea why I should make this long video and I have absolutely no idea why I should be doing it today. But I should. I just felt called to do it. So now it's done, and I have told my story before, and I perhaps will tell it again. Perhaps we people need to hear these stories so many times. And I just can say to you, if you are listening now, perhaps the world needs to hear your stories. Stories of hope, and stories of health, and stories of inherently gratitude for life. I still do not know what the meaning of life is, but the great thing is, I really don't care, because I'm here, and I'm here now, and that is just a miracle. Wonderful to experience this. And you do too. And there is hope, because I know that even though the world can be fucked up, excuse my language, there is also another reality, and that is the more peaceful. And it's not out there, it's in here. And it's for you too to experience, if you would like. I hope. I don't know. I hope you heard this and that you really listened, if it was for you. See you around.